Senior colleagues and colleagues on the high table, kindly permit me to stand on the existing protocol. Greatest OOUites, I know we are almost getting exhausted, and unfortunately, this segment appears to be the most salient, the most important. And I want us to take special attention, because I'm just going to compliment what Dr. Fakunle just said just now, because from experience, personally, I've discovered that this aspect of thesis writing is a very, very difficult one for students. And that is why we advise that you take a special interest in it. The paper to be presented is on research result presentation, and jointly written by myself and my colleague, Dr. Feishola. Now, when we talk about research, because at this point there is no rhetorics at all, when we talk about research, already you've been told that you are not the original searcher. You are just researching into what others have done. And like that, because of the objective of the exercise, which is to bring out novel idea, because you are into that business because of the fact that you want to prove a point, you want to establish a fact. And before you can do that, you need to convince your audience beyond reasonable doubt. And that is why anything you want to do, you want to own it. But unfortunately, our students from experience, when it comes to research result presentation, they give all kinds of excuses. Some will say, oh, if you say, how did you arrive at this, that, you will say, oh, I gave it to somebody. Somebody assisted me in doing it. Yes, you can do it. Nobody is saying that you must become a statistician overnight, but you must own that study, because it is your study. Because at the end of the day, it's your name that will be there. And if anything should crop up, you are going to be the one to be called upon. That is why you must pay special attention. Now, when we talk about what is happening? Okay. Maybe you assist me to use the slide over there. The pointer is not working. Now, when we talk about research presentation, is a very important platform for students and researchers to share, ideas about what they have done. You want to tell others what you have done. You want to tell others what you have been able to contribute. You want to tell others how germane your study is. And that is why, at this very point in time, there is need for you to be very critical about your step. You want to be sure of providing adequate information that will facilitate the understanding of the entire process. Because you have embarked on a process. Look at, we have been coming since yesterday. Everybody has been coming, blowing grammar, sitting down, and what have you. All because of a goal. And what is that goal? To establish a fact. And when we talk about scientific investigation, what is science in it? You want to prove it. And before you can prove it, you must be able to, document the nitty-gritty of the process. And in doing that, you need to provide adequate information that will facilitate the entire process. And that is why the language here should be lucid for easy comprehension. It's very, very important, because here you want to showcase your ingenuity. Here you want to sell yourself. Here you want the people to know you. You want the world to acknowledge what you have done. You have been quoting other sources. You have been saying according to this, according to that. But here now, at the point of presenting your research, findings, you want others to start quoting you. And that is why you must document the process adequately. Hypothesis must be tested with appropriate statistics, and rejection or acceptance criteria well indicated through the level of significance that Dr. Fakonle pointed out the other time. But here, the results are expected, to be presented in descriptive, graphical, tabular, and pictorial forms. Why are you doing that? You are doing that to ensure that everybody have a thorough understanding of the process. Because the idea about research is that you have embarked on a journey, and anybody can take up the step to say, oh, this that this fellow has claimed to have discovered, I want to toe the path. And if they toe the path, they must be able to see they must be able to find out what you have established. And that is why you must be very careful. The tables must be self-explanatory with appropriate headings at the top of the tables. And the graph diagrams, everything, the pictures must be well labeled. And the result, the findings and inferences you must have established, you now, as much as possible, you want to discuss them by comparing and contrasting with previous research studies to show what you are bringing to the table in terms of contribution of your study. Now, if this section is well handled, next slide, please. If this section is well handled, it is expected that the information provided will cover details of background information. If you handle it properly, then it will showcase significance of sharing, networking, and collaborating in research endeavor. And as a matter of fact, it will engender, adequate feedback, which can even project the next level of research at the end of the day. And that is why you must try as much as possible, to present your results, in a manner that is, will be understood by others. Then, apart from that, if you are able to present your result as expected, it will bridge, gaps, between academia and the real world practices. Because why we are having problem in Nigeria, for instance, is that everything we do end up, in the library, gathering dust, because nobody to pick them up. Either as a result of you not being able to sell yourself as expected, or as a result of even the community where you have conducted the study not able to sell you out. Now, in a nutshell, this segment plays a crucial role in promoting rigorous research skill development and even generating new research ideas. However, now the next slide, please. I don't know what is. Did you help me put the thing there? But it's not project. Okay. Come back. Okay. Now, important concept, in research result presentation. Let me tell you, the business here covers just three things. Number one, presentation of demographic data. Number two, presentation of analysis of research question. Number three, presentation of analysis of test of hypothesis. That is just the business. As far as what you call either chapter 4 or chapter 5 in some department or faculty, as far as this segment is concerned. But the roadmap to achieving these key components, the roadmap to achieving it is your understanding, or let me say the compass, to use in navigating your way through here is your ability to understand some salient facts that must be part of your presentation. And that will take me to the next slide. Please, the next slide. Number one of such is research design and methodology. Yes, we have heard about the rhetorics. Research design is the gamut of method you bring to the table, all the processes involved in what you have conducted and what have you. But here, while presenting your research result, you want to briefly explain the research design you have used. Is it correlational? Is it experimental? Is it descriptive? If it is descriptive, what type of descriptive it is? Because some will just say, oh, it's a descriptive study. But is it survey? Is it correlational? We want to know. Then apart from that, you describe the methodology in terms of the sample size you have used, in terms of even the process you follow in recruiting your participants, and what inform your inclusion and exclusion criteria. What exactly did you consider to say, oh, this must be the focus, this must be part of the study, this must not be part of the study? The next to that is data collection and analysis. At this level, you summarize the data collection process, including that measure that you have used in collecting your data, explain the analysis, the statistical procedure you use in analyzing your data, you need to explain them. Then you present the significant findings of your study, and as much as possible, ensure that those who are presented, of course, all now, must be in alignment with your stated research questions or hypothesis. Now, the next to that is visual representation of result. You need to create visually appealing and informative charts, graphs, tables. You need to present your result in an appealing manner, because it's like you want to sell yourself. Anything you have, you must use at this point, so that people will be forced to read what you have done. Then, apart from that, you need to clearly label and explain all the visual elements and ensure that they align with your research objective and data analysis. You want to be very, very sure of all this. Then, one thing I have discovered, we will get to that very quickly, because there will be room for one or two, case studies that I will project very soon. We have seen, or let me say, I have seen personally, particularly in recent time, when students come up with a research presentation, you see them coming up with highly robust, analysis, beautiful tables, pictorials, and what have you. But when it comes to the narrative that I expected to follow, the narrative that will say what is in the table, nothing to show. They will not write anything. And that is not the proper way of writing research results. Then, another very salient, part of research result presentation is your interpretation of results. Here, you interpret and explain the significance of your findings in relation to your research question and or hypothesis. Then you highlight, in case there is any patterns, any kind of relationship that have evolved, that you have seen. Why are you doing that? You are doing that to show to the world that this is what I am contributing. I am not replicating. Nobody is saying you cannot replicate, but if you are replicating, there must be a reason for replicating. You must have been told since yesterday that research is not about you repeating what others have done. If you must repeat, there must be a reason for repeating. But if you know you are actually projecting a particular variable, vis-a-vis what that variable can contribute to certain, things in the world, then you have, as much as possible, to tell us, in case when you finish your analysis and you discover any pattern that evolved, then you try to highlight that. Then discuss the implication of your result, and as well address limitations or potential biases that may have influenced your result. Then discussion. Under discussion, I'm still coming, all this, I will still go over them one more time. Under discussion, you compare your result with relevant literature or previous studies, vis-a-vis establishing, what has been done before, the state of, had before, and what you are bringing to the table. And again, explore potential explanations or provide, next slide, please. Follow me with the slide. And you explore, potential explanations, or you provide plausible reasons for any conflicting, findings you have established. And this is where you have to be careful. Let me tell you a story. There was a time I conducted a study that involved emotion. And everybody, of course, knows that when it comes to display of emotion, our female, folk are best at displaying emotion. But when I concluded my study, reverse was the case. The study review was saying this is the way, but my study was saying this is the way this time around. In other words, it negates the norm. If you are not a smart researcher, at that point, you want to go and do what Professor Aborisade said we should not do. You now begin to conjure to make sure that your analysis or your report tallies with the existing something. You don't need to do that. At this point, you need to come out of your shell. At this point, you need to show your ingenuity. At this point, you need to show your kind of, scholarship. That is where you come up with, for instance, when I concluded that study and I discovered that it wasn't, if somebody is saying that male folk will be very good at displaying emotion, more than the female gender, no literature has ever supported that. Then I now try to think outside the box, look at the characteristics of the participants that I've used, and look at the location where the study, it was an experimental thing. And I discovered one salient fact, apart from what I later discovered in the literature. Now, the thing is now, it's all over the world now. But then, there was no much literature to support it. I discovered that in one of the schools that I used for that study, the students were highly comfortable in terms of provision of necessary things, the desks, the tables, and what have you. Two of them, I used 3 schools. And one of the schools, unfortunately, could not afford the luxury of provision of desks and tables. The students were, they were seated on their floor. Now, if you give somebody, if somebody if somebody feels an instrument, with a lot of relaxation, and somebody is doing the same thing, with something that I can call inconvenience or what have you, you should expect some slight differences. And it is you that will bring that out. When I met with my what is it called? My supervisor then, because it was actually my PhD thesis, and he said I should go and think outside the box. And I started racking my brain. And while I was, reading further, I now discover the possibility of falsehood. Respondents not coming forth as expected of them. At times when you give a questionnaire to people, they just say, that man has come again. What they do is just, particularly in this part of the world, they just stick any nonsense, forgetting that what they are feeling is what you are going to use in making decision. And that was how I was bailed out of the problem. And that is why you must take note of this. Now, in conclusion, when you are concluding your research result, you summarize the main findings and the implications of it. Address your research objective or your research question. Next slide. Hello, next slide, please. You are not following me. Okay, don't worry. Now you conclude with a takeaway message, which we call the thesis of the thesis. Because that is what you will be contributing. Your conclusion must reflect a takeaway message. Now, let's go practical now. Now, I said ab initio that 3 components issues, 3 issues are involved in research presentation. The first one I talked about presentation of demographic data. When we talk about demographic data, we are talking about those things that are personal to those you have investigated. They are about data, things like gender, things like cadre, things like salary, things that are personal to them. That is what you first of all want to present. You want to present it, but the emphasis here is that look at the table being projected now. This is demographic data being presented. Forget about the jargon there. Start from table 1. That table was named table 1 because that happens to be the first table, the assumed first table in this presentation. And that is why it was so labeled, table 1. Now, what is that table 1 projecting? Frequency distribution of respondents' demographic data by gender and age. Now, by the time you look at it, you look at the variables, the variables investigated in terms of the gender, the age, now the category, now the age was determined through range, and so on and so forth. Now, next slide, please. Now, should be in case You may have somebody who may not be interested in the statistical jargons, just interested in just the pictorial. Now, the bar chart is now showcasing what you had seen before. Now picking it one after the other, because we have two variables there, gender and age. Now, the bar chart is about gender. And without you wasting time, you can see that the female gender takes it all, followed by the male gender. Next slide, please. Followed by, now, the age. You can see the age that the 30 to 39 years take the lead, followed by 20 to 29, and so on and so forth. But where the emphasis is that the narrative that follows. And that is the point I was trying to make the other time, because I have seen, in most cases, when you tell our students that, oh, come and explain this table to us, I don't know. Somebody assisted me to do it. You must own your study. Even if somebody has assisted you, you must sit down and ask that fellow to explain to you. Because that narrative is very, very important. Some will not even bother to put any narrative. Now, look at that narrative now. Table 1, which is the title of the table. There, and figures 1 and 2 reveal that a majority of the respondents, a majority of the participants, how many are they? The emphasis is on details here. 699. What is the percentage of that number? 60%. And that's 60%. Which gender is it? Female. And followed by the male. And what other information can we see on the table? Now you can see. There were more female respondents, because that is the implication. You must state it. There were more female respondents in the study. And that the greatest proportion of the participants, happens to be below, 20 and 258 and what have you. Now, you will agree with me that, next slide, you will agree with me that if you put your things this way, even if anybody is interested in following the trajectory, he or she will be able to follow you. Because that is the essence of research. You must be detailed to the point that every idiot will be able to trace your path. Is very, very important. Now, presentation of the analysis of research questions. Now, of course, you know that you must have a topic that you are investigating. This is an assumed topic, for instance. That's supposed not to be there, but for you to follow, so that you know how to get the details at this point done. Now, I said perception of employees on organization customer satisfaction. That is the topic. Now, the point now is that each research question is addressed individually. Your research question is expected to be addressed individually. It should be in case you raise any research question. You address them individually. And when it comes to analysis, the items you have used in analyzing before making the decision, you let us see it. You can see the description there now. Now we have a 3-item scale that measures what our employees' views on their organization customer satisfaction, where we use a 3-item scale and on a Likert format. Now, next slide, please. Next slide. Now, the narrative now. Table 2, because we are passed by table 1. Because all these appropriate headings matters. Table 2 reveals the respondents' views on what? That's your research question. You put it there. And what did you see on the table? Research showed that on the average, the respondents agreed that they deal with customers effectively to achieve high customer satisfaction. How did you know that? The mean portrayed, and the mean is quoted, as well as the standard deviation. What other things did we see in the table? They also agree that their company's product, because don't forget, we have 3 items that we use in measuring that very singular research question. The second item now, that one says that they agree that their company's product and services are aimed towards satisfying customers. How did you get that? The data is there. Everything. But in terms of the third item, however, they disagree that their company exhibits high level of professionalism in dealing with customers, whatever. And you showcase the data as well. All these narratives are very, very important in a research report presentation. Next slide, please. Now, this is presentation of the test of hypothesis. In like manner, of course, you have the topic. The topic here now is belief system, peer pressure, and self-monitoring skills, using it against social adjustment of adolescents in senior secondary school. You start the business there by telling us what that hypothesis is, because you want to present a fact. Which of the hypotheses are you handling? Hypothesis 1. What does hypothesis 1 say? It says there is no significant combined contribution of this and this and this on the criterion variable. Now, that table is table number 3. And that is why you label it number 3. Now, what type of statistical procedure did you use in arriving at that table? Then it shows that it's multiple regression. And what type of multiple regression? What information were you able to deduce from that table? It shows that it was just model summary and coefficient of the multiple regression analysis for the combined contribution of the 3 IVs against the DV. And now, underneath, the model summary is presented, the R square adjusted, the standard error, and what have you, of all what? Of the dependent variable, you state it again. And the independent variable, which are your predictors. Next slide, please. Now, the narratives now. Result in table 3 was significant. Why? Why did you know they are significant? Because the F table, as presented there, is less than the calculated F, which is 41, particularly when your P is less than 0.05. Then the null hypothesis, you now tell us, because you have stated that hypothesis, that as a result of what you have seen now, the null hypothesis was consequently, rejected in favor of the alternative hypothesis. Now, what does that tell us? It tells us that is the conclusion now, that there was a significant combined contribution of the 3 IVs on the DV, particularly among Ogun State students. And what can you see again in that table? Apart from the fact that we've seen the 3 IV now coming together, when you regress them against your predictor, against your criterion. What else can we see on the table? Table 3 further revealed that belief system, peer pressure, and self-monitoring skills jointly accounted for 6.4%. In other words, what you are saying is that all that we can see as contributions of all these 3 IVs on the DV is just 6.4, which means there are other things that we account for the variance in social adjustment of senior secondary school students. All these narratives are very, very important. It's whereby you just present pictorials, figures, graphs, without any narrative. Nobody knows what is there. It's not allowed in scientific investigation. Next slide, please. Another example is this. This one considers gender and academic achievement of students. And what is that hypothesis? The fact that there is no significant difference in the academic achievement of students based on gender. Now, tag table 4. And in like manner, now, what is the statistics that give us this table? Student t-test. What type of student t-test? Student t-test independent. How did you know that? Because it is the t-test of difference in academic achievement, basing it on gender. And you can see the analysis, the gender, the N, the mean, the standard deviation, the degree of freedom, the T calculated, and what have the P and what have you. Now the narrative as well will follow. So, next slide, please. Ladies and gentlemen, when you present your study in this manner, everybody will be able to be carried along. Then when it comes to discussion now, here, your results are interpreted and evaluated against the existing body of knowledge that you have reviewed. And let me tell you something. If you don't have a very solid background, you will suffer the consequence here. Because whatever you have reviewed, you have written at the background, this is where you showcase them. And that is why your background and the literature review section must be very, very solid, because you are still going to lean on them when it comes to discussion. Because here now, you now want to tell us what you have seen and what others had seen before you, and the difference between what you have seen and what others had seen, and the reason why you have seen what you have seen. And if you don't have a solid background to the study, you don't have a very solid literature review session, then you will suffer at this particular level. So the discussion is usually made by relating each of the findings of the study to information as contained in the background. You pick it one by one. In this study, it has been established that gender, in terms of this and this, particularly when it comes to the female folk, we do this and this and this. However, Sheyi 2027 either contradicts this or corroborates it. So at this point, this is where you showcase all this key. And at the end of the day, you try to connect, because that is the essence of this particular session. It connects your study with bigger picture so that everybody will see everything you have done. Thank you very much for listening.